The scientific origin of COVID. This talk is based on two publications, scientific publications. One is called The Origin of COVID. Did People or Nature Open Pandora's Box at Wuhan? By Nicholas Wade. And it was published in May 2021 by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. The other is a book written by a journalist named, a scientific journalist named Paolo Barnard, with two scientists, Dr. Stephen Quay and Professor Angus Dalgleish. The book is called The Origins of the Virus. I'll give you the links at the end of the talk, but both are freely downloadable from the internet. Now, there are two origin stories for COVID: the zoonotic story and the lab leak story. The zoonotic story says that COVID had an animal origin, which then became infectious to people through mutations in intervening animal species. Now, only one bat species has the SARS COVID virus, and that bat cave is 1,200 kilometers away from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. SARS doesn't affect bats, but it can affect humans if it has been mutated through intervening species from the bat to the human. These bats themselves cannot give the humans the SARS virus. It has to go through a mutation process with intervening species. In spite of tremendous efforts, no intermediate animal has been found which could have transferred and mutated the bat virus to humans. Yet, US and Chinese governments both went to great lengths to promote the zoonotic source. Now, the lab link story is interesting because there are some unique characteristics in the COVID virus never seen in nature, but observed in labs, and there were several papers have been written about them. You've seen the picture of the SARS COVID virus, which is a round virus with a bunch of spikes that look like protein spikes that look like mushrooms sticking out all around the round virus. One of the unique characteristics is a groove in the top of each of these mushroom-like protein spikes, and scientifically they're referred to as the furon cleavage. It's been described in literature for 30 years, but never seen in nature. Furon cleavages make viruses attach more easily to human tissue, especially the ACE2 cells in the respiratory tract. The amino acid composition of each of these protein spikes, once again, has never been seen in nature. And the electrical charge in the spike protein had never been seen in nature. But it makes it easier for the virus to attach to other organs, including the mouth and the throat cavities. And there's an HIV gene in the SARS-CoV-2, which makes it much more infectious to humans. And this was the red light for Stephen Quay, the scientist, one of the scientists who wrote The Origins of the Virus. Now we need to talk about gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research is designed to develop potential toxins that could be used by terrorists or one country against another, and by developing the function to gain a function to make it these potential viruses or toxins more infectious and more toxic. The idea is that they can develop countermeasures in case some terrorist or other released could develop and then release such toxic substances into environment. Now, the gain of function research has a variation called gain of function of concern, and that is where the toxic viruses or toxic substances are developed in the laboratory to a point where they could become used in chemical warfare. Now, there's a big effort towards gain of function of concern research during the Bush Jr. administration after 9/11. But when Obama came along, he realized how dangerous it was for this research if it ever escaped. And so he put some severe limitations on it, particularly limitations on the funding by the U.S. government. When Trump came along, he removed a lot of those restrictions and allowed U.S. institutions of research to do more work on gain of function of concern, toxins and viruses. Now, this gain of function research is carried out in labs all the way around the world. But the most advanced gain of function of concern research has been performed at the Wuhan Institute of Virology under Professor Dalgleish, and also at the University of North Carolina. Many papers published in both, particularly by Xi, on gain-of-function genetic engineering using SARS from bats. So effectively, what they've been doing in the gain-of-function of concern research with the SARS-CoV was genetically engineering the virus so that it would have those unique characteristics I just explained, which would make it more infectious. Now, research labs have four categories of safety quarantine. Level 1 is about as safe and contained as your dentist's surgery. Level 4 is totally quarantined to prevent any leaks. Many researchers have complained over the years that the Wuhan Institute of Virology often perform gain-of-function research at level 2 or level 3 labs, where they can escape much more easily than it could from a level 4 lab. Funding for the gain of function of concern SARS-CoV research came from both the Chinese Army, who owned and ran the lab, and from the U.S. National Institutes of Health Infectious Diseases Department. Some funding came from the Pentagon, from DARPA, which is the Pentagon Research Office, but most of it came from the National Institute of Health Infectious Disease Department and the Chinese Army. U.S. funding sources were protected from public scrutiny because of Obama's limitations on gain-of-function of concern research. So funding for the SARS-CoV gain-of-function of concern research was channeled through a New York-based NGO called Eco Health Alliance. There are paper trails, grant applications to National Institute of Health, and payments from the Eco Health Alliance to the Wuhan Institute of Virology and to the University of North Carolina and other research institutions working on gain-of-function of concern research. In November and early December 2019, a number of research papers on SARS gain-of-function of concern research were removed from the Wuhan Institute website. Then an ophthalmologist started asking many questions of why his clients, some of his clients, were dying of strange symptoms. The ophthalmologist was arrested, interrogated, and died of COVID in custody in a Wuhan jail. Still, neither the Institute nor the Chinese government released any information to the public for over a month. Not releasing info, not closing down air and ground transportation for over a month, allowed the virus to spread around the world. By the time the Chinese government told the World Health Organization that it was out in the public, it had already spread to Europe and America. A campaign was started to convince the world that the virus had an animal origin, the zoonotic origin story. EcoHealth Alliance organized an open letter signed by 23 scientists who had all received funding from EcoHealth Alliance, saying that SARS-CoV-2 had a zoonotic origin, most likely passed on through the wet meat market in Wuhan. As the story unfolded, several animals were blamed as the source of the COVID virus, including civet cats and pangolins. The World Health Organization sent an investigative team to Wuhan, but members of the delegation complained they were not getting cooperation, they were not allowed in the labs, and were not allowed to access lab reports. The WHO investigation concluded, saying that it could not get enough evidence to draw any conclusions. So why did the Wuhan Institute, the Chinese government, and indeed the US government cover up all the lab evidence and continued to blame animal sources for the transmission to humans? Well, the authors give several reasons. One is the Chinese army, the Wuhan Institute, and Chinese government wanted to escape the blame, not owning up to the gain of function of concerned research, the funding, nor the escape from the lab. High-level jobs and careers were on the line, particularly since the Chinese government doesn't reward mistakes. So an environment of excuses is the result. The National Institute of Health Infectious Diseases Department didn't want to admit funding, as they were not supposed to be funding gain of function of concern research after restrictions were placed on such research by President Obama. EcoHealth Alliance didn't want their funding sources to dry up. Trump called the virus the Chinese virus. At the time, the media was questioning everything Trump was saying, so it was easy to say if Trump thought it was leaked from a Chinese lab, then he must have been wrong. So it's obvious that the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the SARS virus from the bats that carried the SARS virus, was turned into SARS-CoV-2 virus through genetic engineering, adding in those unique characteristics that I mentioned before, which in every case made them more infectious to humans. It's also obvious that the Wuhan lab, someone in the Wuhan lab caught COVID during the experiment and carried it out into the Wuhan community. Because the virus was genetically engineered to be super infectious, it spread like wildfire around the world. So far, there have been 771 million cases of SARS-CoV-19 around the world. 7 million people have died of it. It's possible no one would have died of it if the US had followed proper guidelines for gain-of-function research, and the Chinese Wuhan lab had been following guidelines for level 4 containment instead of level 2 and 3. Now, the Chinese government might have continued its research on its own without US funding, but it probably would have been less successful and would have been missing out on American expertise. Cases of SARS-CoV could then have been limited to perhaps a few hundred if the Chinese government had contained or quarantined Wuhan immediately the first cases were discovered, instead of their organizing the disinformation campaign supported by the U.S. government, National Institute of Health. The scientists and funders of COVID SARS-2 have still not been held accountable, even though they and their respective governments are responsible for more deaths than Hitler's Holocaust. Have a look here for the links which you can draw down yourself free on the internet and draw your own conclusions. Thank you.